Hello, welcome everyone. Good morning. We begin in a few minutes, but while we wait for everyone, please introduce yourself in the chat. So I'd love to know where you're coming from. Who are you? Um, where you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us this morning for this enriching session. I'm also very excited to get to know how to use this tool for our reporting. So we're still waiting for a few more people. 100 people, journalists, communicators, advocates actually joined in and registered for this event. We only have 100 seats, and we're definitely happy that we're expecting a full house today. But before we start, please let us know where you're joining us from. So, from our registration, we actually have a lot joining from the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. So Southeast Asia represent. We hopefully you get to like say where you're joining us from. Please greetings from the Philippines. Hello, hi. Um Good morning and thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for giving time this morning for us. I know the Philip okay, so the Philippines is just like we finished the State of the Nation address of our president, and there are a lot of like questions about why climate was not included, but there are a lot of like questions on energy transition and nuclear and natural gas. So for the energy transition, so I hope this session will be useful for those who are joining from the Philippines. We are also joined by Della from Jakarta. Hello, Della. I know Della is a very good journalist from Indonesia. Thank you for joining us. Another one from Indonesia, Dino. More from the Philippines, specifically in Quezon City. Tiffany and Lee Ann are from QZC. I'm also from Quezon City, and Lin Song from Singapore. We're still waiting for a few more people. We will start in like a few minutes, but we're really happy that we are expecting a full house today from our colleagues here in the ASEAN region. We're especially glad to see such a diverse mix of journalists, researchers, advocates, communicators, educators, students, and climate professionals in the room. Thank you for choosing to spend your morning with us. I know it's a Tuesday, it's after a grueling Monday yesterday, but I'm really happy that you're spending today with us. So, for those attending one for events for the first time, let me briefly introduce who we are. We are Climate Tracker Asia. I'm Biena Magbitang, the executive director of this institution. We're a non-profit media organization empowering Asian storytellers to produce compelling climate stories that matter. We work with journalists, communicators across the region through fellowships, training programs, collaborative reporting projects, and learning communities. And at the heart of our work is simple belief that every reporting should be a climate reporter, and climate change is not just only just an environmental story. It's also a story about health, food, energy, jobs, migration, culture, inequality, music, politics, you name it, and the everyday decisions that shape people's lives. But we also know that climate communication should not stop with journalists. That's why we also invited researchers, educators, advocates, policymakers, and content creators, and all those who are actually very interested in learning about climate. We all know that you play an important role in helping people understand what is happening and what can be done about it. So we're so happy to have all of you today. So we know that some of you haven't heard about the tool that we'll be presenting today, and so happy that you're very interested to get to know it and to use it to your work, your communication work, your stories, and really happy that Climate Interactive has partnered with us to host this event. And we know that a lot of you have big questions on how do we know which solutions actually move the needle, and this is why exactly we will explore En-ROSE today. En-ROSE is a global climate simulator developed by Climate Interactive and MIT Sloan. It allows users to test different climate energy policies and immediately see how those choices may affect global temperature outcomes. And and instead of discussing climate solutions only in theory, En-ROADS allows us to experiment with them. And it helps us see the scale of change required, the interaction between different policies, and the trade offs or unexpected outcomes that may emerge. So, for journalists and communicators, this can especially be valuable to actually test our stories, to interrogate those climate promises critically, and ask sharper questions and understand interventions and avoid presenting one policy as a silver bullet. Because better understanding leads to better questions, and better questions lead to stronger climate stories. So we are very, very fortunate today that we'll be joined by Katherine Markova from Climate Interactive. Katherine works with people and organizations around the world to help them understand climate systems, explore solutions, and use tools such as En-ROAD to support better decisions and conversations. She will guide us through the simulator and help us test some of the ideas you may already have started sharing and you and all already started researching or started already writing about. So, Catherine, thank you so much for being with us. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Biena, for this wonderful introduction. And thank you all for being here today with us. So my name is Katherine. I lead partnerships at Climate Interactive. And this session will be very interactive as well. And because I've just said the word interactive twice, this unlocks our first live poll. Yes, we will be using live polling today. I have four questions to ask of you. So if you could scan this QR code with your phone, navigate your way to our software. You don't need to introduce yourself, just click skip. It'll take you to our software. And the question I'm going to ask you is, how confident are you in identifying high impact climate actions or policies? So this is the QR code. Okay, I can see some people voting. Excellent, excellent. All right, so are you not at all confident? This is on the scale of 1 to 5. Not at all confident, not very confident, a little confident, confident, and like super. You're an expert, right? You've been working in this field for years and you're very, very, very confident. Just curious to know where you think you are on this journey of understanding solutions. All right, so this is what I'm seeing. So I would say most of you saying not very confident. That's fine. That's fine. That's why we're here. A little confident, okay? And we've got some experts as well. Okay, wonderful. So I would say we have some learning to do today, okay? So we all have a little bit to learn apart from the 10% of you who are experts. So that's great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for engaging with this. This is also, just so you know, this is our method of engaging our audiences when we run these workshops. The idea here is that you need to be interacting with your audience within the first 3 minutes. Otherwise, you lose them. They go and start looking at their phones. So we use live polling as a way of, first of all, gauging what the audience needs from us, what they'd like to learn about, but also as a way of keeping engagement up throughout the session. So keep the browser window open. I have 3 more questions for you, okay? Let's now go back to En-ROADS. Okay, so what is En-ROADS? En-ROADS is a global climate simulator. It runs on a browser. It's freely available. Everything that I'm going to be talking about today, every single thing, freely available in 24 languages, including last month, we translated this interface into Bahasa Indonesia. Thank you to our translators and ambassadors. So it's now available in Bahasa and a range of other languages, as you can see. But unfortunately, we have simplified Chinese, but no other South and Southeast Asian languages. But we do have Bahasa now. Okay, so what do we do with En-ROADS? There are really 3 use cases. One is just basic capacity building. Where do emissions come from? What are the biggest drivers of climate change? The other is actually looking at impacts, right? What the industry calls physical risks. So impacts, heat, we'll go through these and I'll show you some of them. And then the other thing you can do is also build your scenario of future success. Now, that's what we typically use the simulator for with policymakers. Now, with journalists, there are three use cases that have emerged, okay? So the very first one, New York Times, actually, this is from several years ago, they used outputs, they used graphs and maps and other data from En-ROADS, you can see it mentions us and our friends at MIT, to develop this visual article, so visualizations. And I'll show you how you can download data from the model and what functionality is available. So that's number one, visualizations. Number two, this is my favorite, Maxine Joselo of Washington Post, she's now at New York Times, wanted to fact check really rapidly. 11th hour, she's in the newsroom. She wanted to fact check a legislative proposal by this member of US Congress, Kevin McCarthy, who said that the only climate solution that the US needed was to plant 1 trillion trees. She knew that that wasn't the answer. So she used En-ROADS and wrote this article, 1 trillion trees, calculating the mitigation potential of the En-ROADS simulator. Okay, so that's another, you can really rapidly assess a piece of legislation or climate solution, and you can see if the proposal is not living up to expectations, why, okay? And then finally, I'll show you this. Mongabay, this is the most recent ones from 4 months ago. We actually developed a different tool to assess, to show how much, this is around the time that the US was threatening to invade Venezuela. We actually developed a separate tool to show how much of Venezuelan oil was in sensitive areas, okay, and how much biodiversity would be lost if oil were to be extracted there. So this is actually a completely separate tool that we've built for this purpose. But again, somebody wrote an article about this. So these are the sort of the journalistic use cases that I'm talking about. Okay, so back to the model. What are you looking at? You're looking at our control panel and you're looking at our baseline. Okay, so the baseline is the current trajectory that we're on. Okay, it's not a positive climate trajectory. I don't need to tell you this, you know this. The baseline takes into account all progress already made on climate. So when I say progress, policies, right? Not pledges by governments, but actual legislation. Investments, financial investments in research and development. We have, for example, you can see rates of renewable energy adoption, rates of electric vehicle adoption. This is sales of electric vehicles going up and up and up and up. Renewable energy is going up and up and up because it's the cheapest source of electricity. So it's all the conditions that exist as of today. And then we assume that that same rate of progress continues, but we make no further progress on climate action, right? So under this scenario, we headed towards 3.3 degrees of warming by the end of the century. Now, we're not saying that this will happen. This is not our forecast. We're just saying if current conditions continue, this is what's going to happen. And so you can then look at the impacts that we have in terms of, we have six maps. So 6 maps. Temperature change. This is actually a really cool 3D atlas here that is made available to us by our friends at MIT. You won't see this anywhere else. And what allows you to do is see how temperature is changing. You can drop a pin anywhere on Jakarta, for example, and fast forward and show how temperature is changing. And you can contrast it to other places in the region. You can also look at extreme heat days. So we can go to Singapore, well, actually Singapore, extreme heat and humidity, for example. I'm not showing this to depress you because in the moment we'll build a better future together, okay? And we'll see what actually works on climate. So we have these maps and the downscaling, the resolution here, each of these blocks is 22 by 22. if you ever need to know what is this saying, how do I interpret this, if you click on this triangle, it actually gives you the whole explainer, links, definitions, so you have all of this in one place. We also have, some of you may be focused on environmental matters, so loss of biodiversity, for example, so we have that, extinction risks, when species have to change their migration patterns, so we have all of that. Anyone is interested in human health, we have outdoor labor losses from extreme heat, for example. So there's 185 different impacts that you can look at. Some are bad news, some actually good news in terms of, again, cheaper, how much cheaper electricity is becoming from renewable energy, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So this is the baseline. This is one possible future. We choose today not to accept that future, and we will build a scenario together. So every single graph that you see here is displayed between the years of 2000 and 2100. Okay. Now, if you're looking for historical data, actually the model goes back all the way to 1990. So if you're interested in looking at temperature history, you can go back and look. And you can see we also compare outputs from En-ROADS to outputs from other data sources, such as Met Office in the UK and NASA in the US. So that's how we know we're on the right track. Okay. So in terms of just the basic research, we have a lot of information available to you. The focus, however, is not on impacts. The focus is on solutions. What actually works, okay? And so in terms of the options that we have, what can you actually simulate? By the way, just to show you the complexity of this model, there's about over 400 inputs and then over 100 assumptions. So you can build a million different scenarios, right? Millions different scenarios. But in terms of how we show a different range of climate solutions, when I say solutions, this could be a policy, like a government policy. This could also be an investment by a pension fund, for example, an institutional investor. This could also be a corporate strategy. It could also be a personal lifestyle choice. So think about a broad definition of solution. One thing I will also say is this is a global model, right? It's intentionally global. You won't be able to simulate the impact of what if Indonesian government does X, or what if the government in the Philippines does that. It's a global model, and that's really intentional. Everything we're talking about, climate is a global system. Energy is a global system, as we're right now reminded of because of the geopolitical developments and the war in Iran. Oil is a very highly globalized commodity that also has knock-on impacts on prices on other types of energy. So energy is a global system. Food is a very global system as well. So we invite you to think globally, but then you do have those local impacts that you can look at. Okay. So now for the fun part. So we'll test a few of these solutions together. So on the left is where we get our energy from. So energy supply. And this may be surprising to you. This will look different in your country, but globally, you may be reading in papers from time to time. Somebody will say, oh, we've reached peak coal, right? So like no more energy from coal, or gas is going to shrink. Actually, no. So coal is alive and well in places like India, and those of you dialing from Indonesia, you know that Indonesia is a big part, coal is a big part of the mix, energy mix in Indonesia. So coal is still alive and well, and in fact, it expands by the end of the century. Oil is also alive and well for now, but it shrinks towards the end of the century, and that's because it's the most expensive type of fossil fuel. Gas is stable and even growing a little bit between now and the end of the century. Many policymakers see natural gas, which, by the way, is 98% methane. There's nothing natural about it. They see it as transition fuel, so something to get us to cleaner future. So there are many policies that actually support continued production of gas. The one thing we have been really good at as the global community is adding more renewables onto the grid. Renewables were a tiny part of the mix at the beginning of the century, like a blip, right? And now, look, it's already a big part of the mix. In some countries globally, we're about there. But towards the end of the century, it's going to be almost as big as all other fossil fuels combined. Now, we're also Some of our energy comes from bioenergy, so that's burning of organic material to produce energy, and then a little bit from nuclear as well. Okay. But also, the most common question right now that I'm being asked when I run these workshops is, do you take into account AI? Yes, we do. As of a couple of weeks ago, this model now incorporates AI as well. So if you search for data centers, you'll see all sorts of impacts there and graphs. You can see there's about 5 graphs altogether on AI and data centers. Okay, so I'm going to run another poll in a minute, so get ready. So on the left, we have energy supply policies and solutions. So coal, we're not going to go that deep. But again, if you're doing some deep research, what are the 6 ways that we can equitably phase out coal gradually? Coal right now enjoys a 30% subsidy on its production. So that's tax breaks, loans, etc. You can choose to unwind that, for example, right? Or you can choose to put a tax on it, or you can choose to reduce new infrastructure. So stop permitting any new plants. You can put carbon capture and storage on it. This is another use case for you guys. Greenwashing, how to tell greenwashing. You can really quickly spot in En-ROADS whether something is a true climate solution or it's a distraction. I think you see where I'm going with this, with CCS. Okay, you can reduce utilization, you can retire those plants early. So we're not going to go into that detail, but you can see the depth of the model. And by the way, also, if you click on these 3 dots and you could click on this help button, it gives you examples. What does discouraging coal look like? What are the big messages? What are the key dynamics? What are the co-benefits? What are the equity considerations, right? You've got all this information here, so you don't have to go and spend hours and hours and hours researching it. Everything here is in one place, in the same place. So there's a lot of information available to you. Okay, so let me finish explaining the options that we have, and then you're going to vote. So on the energy supply, we can phase out coal, oil, gas. We can do that through a carbon pricing mechanism, okay? As about 20% of the world economy is covered by some form of pricing, so putting a tax on pollution. We have new zero carbon, so that's nuclear fusion, new types of energy, traditional nuclear, and then renewables, okay? And then we have bioenergy. And actually just working with a journalist in Thailand, she's writing a piece about how bioenergy is terrible for air pollution and human health. So it shouldn't be treated as renewable energy. So she's using our model to help provide some scientific evidence for that. Okay, so that's the production. In the middle is consumption. How we use this energy in transport, energy efficiency, electrification, in buildings and industry, energy efficiency, electrification, population growth, economic growth. What happens if economy grows faster or slower? Okay, and then finally we have nature-based solutions and non-carbon, so methane, other types of greenhouse gases. That's on the right-hand side. So planting trees lives here, agricultural emissions, plant-based diets, food waste, prevention of deforestation. I know it's a big topic of discussion in Indonesia. Reducing waste and leakage, again, reducing methane, and then direct air capture, okay? So sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. All right, so these are your options. We also have CCS, we also have green hydrogen, we also have all sorts of smaller, more obscure solutions, but these are your options, okay? We're gonna go back and I'm gonna ask you right now, I'm gonna activate this poll. I'm gonna ask you which one you'd like to look at, which one you'd like to test, because we have limited time, we're not gonna be able to do it all, but let's see how many we can squeeze in the next 30 minutes or so. Okay, hopefully you still have the QR code, but if not, there's the QR code. Okay, great. Votes are coming in. Give me, you have unlimited options there or choices, but give me one each, between us, let's get some consensus as to what's of interest to you. In a moment, I'll share your responses. Okay. So got some tree planting, always very popular. We've got renewables. We have nuclear. Okay. Electrification of transport. All right. Gas and bioenergy. All right. Okay. Well, that's good. Direct air capture as well. All right. Well, let's see. We won't be able to get to all of them, but the purpose of today is to show you how to use En-ROADS. So you can go off in your own spare time and check out these solutions. Okay, so we have a lot of consensus for tree planting. Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you for voting. All right, let's go back. Okay, so there's actually a bit more here than just tree planting, but the tree planting is the big one, okay? By the way, before I move the slider, I just want to say two things. There are some climate solutions that are relatively small, but they have really big co-benefits, okay? So other benefits. So they're worth doing, even though they may not be delivering the biggest climate benefit, okay? Number one. Number two, what I would say is every fraction of a degree matters. So as we know, the goal of the Paris Agreement is to keep warming to well below 2 degrees and as close as possible to 1.5. So climate change isn't binary. It's not like we solve it or it's just all just terrible. It'll be somewhere in between, right? So it'll be hopefully somewhere in between these two numbers. So every fraction of a degree matters, and you can show in En-ROADS what that means in terms of lives saved, biodiversity preserved. So I'll just preface that. Okay, so I'm going to move this slide all the way to the right. That means the only thing we do as a global community, you and I and all the governments of the world, the only thing we do is plant trees. Translates into about 1 trillion trees that Maxine Joslow wrote about, okay? I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go back and run this poll, all right? I'm going to ask you by how much you think we can reduce temperature. We're 3.3 right now. What does your mental model tell you? We're here to help you build lasting mental models. We're not here to just give you a bunch of data. What does your mental model tell you by how much we can reduce the temperature? By 0.1 or 0.2 or 0.5 or 0.6, or maybe it's a whole 1 degree, right? What does your mental model tell you? How big of a solution is it at a planetary scale, okay? All right, so 0.2, 0.1, 0.5, 1 degree. So we have quite, as you can see, this is the reason why we've developed the model, is to help you think in these systems. We have a range of responses here, 0.1, 0.2. And I appreciate some of you may have gone into the model, already modeled it. So, okay. So we have some, yeah, okay. We have different views. Okay, fantastic. All right, let's go and do it. I'm going to move the slider. That means we're planting trees. We're not doing anything else. We haven't done anything to the energy system. We're just planting trees. Okay. 0.1. Those of you who said 0.1 were right. Now, why is that the case? So, by the way, again, who doesn't love trees? We all love trees. Trees have so many benefits. Cleaner air, better soil, reducing heat in large cities. Fantastic. Local jobs. We love trees. Let's go and plant more trees. It's not a huge climate solution. There are multiple reasons for that. I'd like you to think about what's happening globally, what's driving the climate crisis. There are two very big global trends happening right now. And think really, really big picture, not just like we eat meat, we drive cars, we burn coal. Think big picture, okay? And this is what we call the Kaya graph. It's so helpful to explain what's contributing to the climate crisis. As you know, global population is growing. We're now at 8 billion people in 2026. We're going to be at about 10 billion people by about 2085, okay? Global population is growing. So what happens to land? We need to set aside more land to grow crops to feed to people, okay? The other thing that's happening is GDP per capita is also growing. Incomes are growing in low and middle income economies. We're actually lifting people out of poverty. right? We have a lot of like way too much overconsumption. That's another side of the coin, right? In the global north, places like the US. So, but incomes are growing. So people are able to do things like send their child to school and buy their first car, etc. What happens when incomes grow? We know from history that people add more meat to their diet. So that means that we need to set aside even more land to grow crops, to feed to animals that we also need land for, right? So you can see what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that we have multiple demands on our land, and combination of growing population and growing incomes means that we're limited, okay, by how much land is actually available. We actually have a graph that shows, yeah, so land for CO2 removal. Let me show this to you. So to plant 1 trillion trees means we will need to find 2 Indias. So the area of the size of 2 Indias, right? We have a natural limit on the amount of land. The other way, this is a good time to show you our assumptions. So we have an assumption around this amount of land that's available. And by the way, again, from the perspective of you using this tool to do some research, we've done all the research for you, so you don't have to. We've concluded that the amount of land available is 550 million hectares. You can change this assumption if you want. And you can also read all these, we've read all these papers to come up with this conclusion, okay? So that just shows you the complexity of the model. So trees are great. Let's go plant trees. They're not a huge climate solution for that reason. By the way, aviation industry, they need to decarbonize. They're looking at 3 different pathways. One is green hydrogen. The other is electrification, which is only suitable for small aircraft. The other pathway you're looking at is sustainable aviation fuel, which is basically bioenergy. It's burning trees and bamboo to produce energy. That's going to place another demand on our land. There's going to be another use case or use for our land. So that's an unknown at this point, but it can happen. Okay, right. I liked somebody's idea of testing nuclear. Nuclear is a good example of capital trade-offs. So this model is based on systems thinking, where all these big systems, all the things working together, we have time delays and feedback loops and capital trade-offs. And this is a really, really good example. So I'm going to move the needle here. I'm going to move the slider. What we're actually doing here, technically, is we're putting an even higher subsidy. Right now, nuclear energy globally, this will be different in your country, but globally it's subsidized at about 30%, okay, of cost. So it's already subsidized. What we are doing here is introducing an even higher level of subsidy, okay? So you know the drill by now. I'm going to ask you to make a prediction as to what's going to happen to this number. We're at 3.2 degrees now. Every fraction of a degree matters. What's going to happen to the temperature? And I'm going to move the slider, and it helps by 0.2. Let's see why not more, right? So I'm going to replay this. And what I'd like you to do is I'm going to ask you to see what happens to these different wedges. So nuclear, as you can see, it expanded, right? Because we've just made it cheaper to produce renewable and nuclear energy. I'm going to ask you to see what happens to renewables, and I'm going to ask you to see what happens to fossil fuels. So here we go. I'm going to replay it. Okay, nuclear grows. What happens to other wedges? They get squeezed out, right? They shrink a little bit. And each one shrinks by a different amount. So there's a lot of science that goes into determining how much each one will shrink by, because we have capital trade-offs. And we have some real examples of venture capital funds and other investment vehicles when they start putting money into nuclear or other types of new technologies. They put less capital into renewables, okay? So renewables get defunded. So what you get is you get 2 things working together. We get some benefit from nuclear because you're not combusting fossil fuels to produce, so it's low carbon energy. but you lose some of the benefit because there's less money available to deploy renewable energy. Okay, so that's really important. So we're helping you think in systems, right? So hopefully you're getting this idea of it's not just simple, do this, problem solved. We have all these different systems working together. Okay, renewable energy. There was a renewable energy vote. So I'm going to move this. And again, this will surprise you, but there's a really good reason for this. So again, so what we're talking about by renewable energy is already subsidized again, 25%, different in each country, but globally. So we're subsidizing even more. Now, at this point, by the way, the order in which we move these sliders makes a difference. Okay, because by this stage, we already somewhat decarbonized the grid, right? We introduced some more nuclear energy, right? So the order in which we test these makes a difference. Okay, so I'm going to move the slider. That means that every government in the world is introducing an even bigger incentive to deploy renewable energy. Okay, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction again. What's going to happen to the temperature? I'm moving the slider. Oh, so it does actually help. It helps by about less than a degree. So it's small benefit. Okay, if I was testing this on a standalone basis, it would be 0.1. Now you're probably very surprised. Like, why? I was told it's all about renewable energy, right? It's all about renewable energy. There are two reasons why that's the case. First of all, the forecast, the prognosis for renewable energy is already so good because it is the cheapest source of electricity, overtaking coal, right? So if I were to reverse this is our starting point. This is marginal cost of electricity. So this is how much each additional unit of electricity costs us. So when you flick a switch, you have electrons flying into your apartment. So how much each of that kilowatt hour is costing us? As you can see, renewables is the only source that continues getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Coal is flat. Nuclear is flat. We already extracted all economies of scale. There's no more to be gained. Nuclear is as expensive as it'll ever be. It's not getting cheaper. Oil, on the other hand, is getting more and more expensive every decade. We already exhausted all easily available reserves. Each additional reserve is more expensive to access and then to extract energy from. So that's why this curve looks so positive, is because the economics of renewable energy is very, very favorable. There's another thing that's at play as well with renewable energy. What do we use renewable energy for? To make electricity. Okay? So every type of energy, as we saw in that graph, right? I showed you right now on this one. As you can see, when we subsidize one, the other one loses out. They all compete with each other, right? They're all in competition. If you do something to coal, gas expands. If you do so all of them competing with each other. But there's one exception. Renewables do not compete with oil. Renewables are used to make electricity. Oil is used for fuel. Only a tiny, tiny percentage of oil is used to make electricity. Most of it is fuel, right? In your car, in our ships, in our planes. So those two sources are non-substitutable. So we can continue introducing renewable energy forever. That's not going to reduce our reliance on oil unless we do what? Unless we electrify. Electrification is a way that helps us switch over and set up renewables for success, to make sure that renewables are even a greater success than they already are. Okay. The alternative is, let's rewind electrification. The alternative is to, take some actions to make oil more expensive to produce, right? We could do that. The problem is, you'll probably guess what I've just said, then gas takes over, right? So there are different ways that policymakers can use to transition away from fossil fuels. If you do this on an individual basis, like just coal or just oil or just gas, that means that other fossil fuels will compensate. the more effective way of doing this is through carbon pricing. But I'll leave carbon pricing to the end, actually. So we planted trees. We've introduced more nuclear energy. We've introduced more renewables. I'm going to move electrification as well, because I know you wanted to do that. Okay. All right. Direct air capture. Somebody moved. Let me just check that there wasn't another one that you wanted to. Yeah. Okay. Deforestation is the other one. Yeah. So direct air capture. What is direct air capture? Okay. So this is, again, going back to fact checking and greenwashing. This is a really good analytical tool for sense checking statements that are made by conventional energy companies, right? And right now, what they're saying is that, oh, don't worry about fossil fuel production. Fossil fuel production is not the problem. Emissions are the problem. So as long as we can capture emissions, either at source or from the atmosphere, as long as we can capture all emissions, we can continue producing fossil fuels for the longest time. That's not the case. And you can see that really clearly with carbon capture and storage, which we're not going to have time to do now, but you can check them out by after the session. We actually have a really good video on it and also a good FAQ on this. The other way to do this is by pulling emissions that are already in the atmosphere down into this machine that will filter the air, capture the carbon, and then deposit it somewhere underground. Okay, so there are some companies, there's a big one in Switzerland, that have been trying to do this at scale for a number of years. And, you know, the IPCC and all the International Energy Agency, all these preeminent organizations that tell us how we can reach better future, they're telling us that at some point we'll need to start drawing down that carbon dioxide that's already in the atmosphere. So the question is, how do we do this? Do we do this with nature-based solutions like soil and trees, or do we do this with technology? And so technological carbon dioxide removal, direct air capture, is one of those ways. I'm going to move the dial here, the lever, and I want you to make a prediction as to what's going to happen to the temperature. Not much, right? Not much. There are so many challenges and limitations of this technology. It's very, very, very expensive. As you can see, it's about to capture each ton, it's about $660. Even with a maximum subsidy on incentive, it doesn't really drop below about $400. It's very expensive. It'll take decades to, if it's successful. It hasn't been successful to date. It will take decades to scale. So you see when the two lines diverge, so our current trajectory and this scenario, this is always a good indication of how long it will take us as a global community to scale these solutions, right? How many years will it take them to be effective? And as you can see, the two lines only start diverging in about 20 years' time. The only startup in this space pretty much failed recently. It's Climeworks in Switzerland. They failed to deliver some of the carbon credits that they promised to Microsoft, their investor. So there are many, many limitations of this technology. In other words, we cannot rely on it, right? We have other solutions that are much more effective right now. Okay, so what you're probably seeing is we've already moved 4 sliders. It hasn't gotten us far. And what I'll tell you is there are some other solutions that get overlooked that have much higher potential. When we talked about energy, renewables, nuclear, other types, fossil fuel phase out, the one thing that gets overlooked is that I'm going to say something that's going to be quite controversial. We don't need more renewable energy for renewable energy's sake. We need renewable energy to be displacing fossil fuels, which, as you can see right now, it's not doing without specific supply side policies, right? What we actually need to be doing, you see this graph, we need to be reducing the overall amount of energy we produce, fossil fuels or renewables. We need to reduce our consumption of energy. And one of the best ways to do that is with energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is such an important mechanism, and it gets overlooked all the time. Policymakers overlook it. investors overlook it. It doesn't deliver like massive returns on investment, but it's proven, it's cheap to deploy. We know, like, LED light bulbs, when you leave a room, making sure that the lights go off, insulation in buildings, energy efficiency in transport is actually transit, using more transit, using mode switching, home working, all of that really, really boring, basic stuff is actually very, very important. The other thing that gets overlooked all the time as well is methane. Okay, it's very, very important to take action on methane. It has high global warming potential. Where does methane come from? It comes from energy. So pipelines leak, gas pipelines leak. That creates a lot of methane. Agriculture, animal agriculture, cows burping, and waste. So all the waste we send to landfills, all of that produces methane. It has really high global warming potential, much higher than carbon dioxide. And one of the most effective ways of eliminating methane is to reduce waste and leakage. Look at that. We've just shaved off another 0.2 of a degree. Okay. So energy efficiency. So you saw before that, every single solution was only moving the dial by 0.1, 0.1, 0.1 and a half. Waste and leakage, really important. Agricultural emissions is another one. Energy efficiency in buildings. Okay. Now, I've saved the best for last. Okay. By the way, deforestation. This is where the model diverges from your local experience, because globally, believe it or not, deforestation is rising until for another decade, and then it's falling. And that you'll probably argue, you'll probably say that's not the case. That's not what I'm seeing. The reason why deforestation is falling is because we're actually getting better at growing food every year. Crop yields are increasing. Now, crop yields are decreasing because of global warming, but actually crop yields are increasing because we're getting better at growing food. Unfortunately, one of the reasons why we're getting better at growing food is because we are deploying more and more synthetic fertilizers. Okay, so that's not good, because they're also causing a climate problem. So actually reducing deforestation, if I do this, it does help, as you can see, but it doesn't help more because deforestation is expected to fall. Right now, it's expected. If income's growing more, if meat consumption goes up even more, deforestation can definitely still rise even more. So that is, I guess, maybe a positive or favorable forecast, but that's it. So it does help, but it just doesn't help more because of what we're seeing in the model. Okay. Last thing, I did say that phasing out individual fossil fuels is not as effective because they all compete with each other, right? And one will overtake when the other one is taxed. One of the ways that we can phase out fossil fuels more equitably is through a carbon price. Okay. There's this concept in climate policy called social cost of carbon. And that's essentially how much each ton of pollution costs us as a global community in health outcomes, in being able to or not being able to insure your home, loss of biodiversity, etc., etc. In the model, each ton of pollution, the social cost of carbon is almost $6,000. Guess how much we're taxing each ton of pollution right now globally? $5. Huge disconnect. So you can see why. That explains the failure of policy on climate. Each ton is costing us 5,600. We're taxing it at 5. So one of the most effective ways to decarbonize the grid is through carbon pricing. And I'm going to just ratchet it up and go all the way up and up and up. Off we go. And we are now well below 2 degrees. Okay. Now, carbon price isn't going to be $250 tomorrow. We've been at $5 for a long time. So I'm going to set it a more realistic $50 or so. So what are you saying? We're at 1.9 degrees, right? So we've actually built a scenario that gets us close to the goals of the Paris Agreement, right? And we can go back and look at heat and humidity, and we can look at temperature change, and you can compare. This would have been our baseline. This is 3.3 degrees of warming. This is Jakarta. 3.1, actually warming at a rate kind of in line with global average. But this is this scenario, right? So you can compare different scenarios. What about extreme humidity and heat days? Again, let's zoom out and you can look at, this was our baseline. This is our, by the way, some places you can see there isn't much of a difference between the baseline and this scenario, so we still need to adapt. So adaptation is important, right? We can go to any other part of the world and the Philippines and check that as well. So what else? You can see how quickly air pollution improves. Look, massive drop in air pollution as soon as we start putting a price on carbon. What about loss of biodiversity, right? Extinction risk of endemic species, flat, not exponential, but flat. So you can see how much better we can do with more ambitious policy. As I said, there's about 185 things. If you're researching population exposed to extreme weather events, if you're researching frequency of extreme heat, vector-borne diseases, there's just so much that you can see here. All right, I'm going to leave a few minutes for questions, but one other thing I will say, the model is available freely online. We have for you a user guide. We have a technical reference guide that's more technical than the user guide. There's a lot of research. Please consult it. It's all free to use. Please reference, of course, as a source, but it's up to you. We also have free training as well. You can sign up to our free training. We actually next week, we're launching our 4-week cohort. So it's a live cohort. It's going to run for 4 weeks. And we already have 2,000 people signed up. So click on this link and it will take you to our training. If you're interested in any of this data, you can copy this data. So you can download it from the model, okay? And by the way, we've just built, as you can see, we built a unique URL. So it's a unique link that we have that I'm going to drop in the chat, actually, so you have it there. So this is our current scenario that we've just built. All right. And I'm also going to drop a link to our training as well. So do we have any burning questions? We're about 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Katherine. That was really a great deal to think about, especially around difference between solutions and that sounds ambitious and solutions that create significant change and tested together. I think we have some questions around. So Sherwood is asking, can this be considered as a futures thinking tool?
Sorry, say it again. Which
I flagged it in your screen, so he is
Oh, yes,
asking
can this be
if
considered as a
he is
futures thinking
asking.
tool? Yes, absolutely. That's exactly why we've developed it, to be thinking about all the different futures that we can have. People sometimes ask us, is this like the worst case scenario, right? And actually, it could be even worse. Like we don't take into account the impact of wars, for example, right? But the future will most likely be a lot better. And there's so many different pathways that we can take right now. There are many people that say, oh, it's all about the supply side of the equation, right? It's all about phasing up. Some people say it's all about the demand side of the equation. It's all about, I have a lot of people that have said to me, I think it's all about reducing population growth. Like, it's a very contentious topic, right? And it's, who are you to talk about how to right size families, right? So there are some really strong opinions on this. And so policymakers have strong opinions. Some people say it's all about nature-based solutions. We just need to let nature do its course. So absolutely, there's so many different possible futures, and this allows you to do that what if scenario. What if we did this, or what if governments go down this road? Actually, this is also really good for those of you covering COP. This could be a really nice way of, once again, adding up all the proposals during COP and saying, does this get us to the goals of the Paris Agreement? This year, they're going to be focused on electrification. As you could see, electrification by itself, it's a good enabling mechanism. It doesn't get us to the goals of the Paris Agreement. It's just a way for us to, it's a critical mechanism for us to switch over to renewable energy, but it in itself is not going to get us there. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'd like to paraphrase this question from Jaya a bit to follow up on what we've already talked about, futures thinking. Are there already like 1.5 degree scenarios coming from all of the simulations you've done so far?
Yes. Well, so the good news, it's still possible for us to get to 1.5 degrees of warming physically. So physically, and if you look at some of the financials, how much global income we're losing right now, it's, there have been numerous studies that have been done that have concluded that it's cheaper for us to transition to a cleaner future than have to deal with the fallout from extreme weather events. So I would say physically, it's absolutely possible for us to get to 1.5. Financially, it's possible. Politically is another question, right? The biggest challenge right now is politicians not taking enough action, financial industries not making the right investments, right? And just generally, we need to educate our populations, our citizens about the need for this as well, so they can support those climate actions, right? So yes, it's possible. You pretty much have to move every slider, and 1.5 requires a really high level of carbon pricing. But absolutely, you can go and we got to 1.7, so I only needed to move a couple of more things to get us to 1.5. It's still possible, and it's one other thing. It's still possible with the solutions that we have available to us. I didn't move fusion. I didn't move hydrogen. I didn't move CCS. Right? We did nothing on solar geoengineering. We don't have that in the model, but so we have all the solutions we need. We just need to deploy them at scale.
And I think that connects to Dina's question. The Does the model can actually compute for cost to benefit ratio?
Yeah, so not directly. So we don't have like, okay, how much is this going to cost vis-a-vis how much it's going to save. That is really, that is different depending on which country. And what you can do is, first of all, look at the cost of the climate crisis. We have this economic damage function that shows you how many trillions of dollars we're going to be losing every year because of climate change. So you can take that. For some of the solutions, we actually have, I showed you that cost curve for direct air capture. We have, you can model. So if every government in the world got really serious about this new climate solution and put a lot of money into it, subsidies, how much is it going to cost? And then you can see how much then you can compare. Like if we do this for renewables, it's going to cost X billion a year. If we're going to do this for CCS, it's going to cost X billion a year. If we do this for direct air capture, if we're going to do, so that is another interesting thing you can do. You can run an experiment where you've removed all the subsidies from fossil fuels. You can see how much money is available and then invest them in other things like renewables and see how far that gets you. So that's one of the things you can do. But what we don't have is like a calculator that says per each ton of pollution, like renewable energy can save you X amount. So there's some math that you need to do maybe outside of the model. But yeah. Thanks, Dino. It's good to see you. That's one of the supporters of our work.
So
Frequent flyer.
we actually have like a lot of questions coming in, but I'd like to take on Gabriel's question on AI, and
Okay.
since we you already mentioned a while ago that data centers are actually already included in the model.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And actually, this is a great question, Gabrielle. When we incorporated AI, and when I say AI, what I mean is we've done nothing. How much more energy will we have to produce to power data centers driven by AI? Right? That's the question we were trying to answer. The temperature didn't go up. And I was asking how is it the temperature doesn't go up? Like I hear every day in the news, like, oh my God, we're going to just blow past all of our targets, right? Because there's going to be so much more additional energy. And one of the really favorable factors, and there's a graph on it in the model, is the energy efficiency of data centers. So energy intensity is falling. So energy efficiency of data centers is increasing at such a rate that is right now almost counterbalancing additional emissions from data centers. Now we made one big assumption that generally data centers will be powered from grid electricity, right? Because there's two multiple ways that they could all be powered with additional fossil fuel energy or additional renewable energy, we decided to make an assumption that it's going to be grid energy. And grids are also decarbonizing every year. You can see we're adding more and more renewable energy, right? So, but there are some sensitivities, and if you change some of the assumptions, we can look at additional half a degree of warming as well. So yes, so I agree with you. That is in the model. We will have to produce more energy. It'll have to come from somewhere. A lot of uncertainties about where that's going to come from. Obviously, China is a big driver of this. US is doing something different. US right now is gas and CCS and nuclear. Right now, improving energy efficiency of data centers is really helpful. We'll see if that holds, but there are lots of other uncertainties and sensitivities. By the way, AI is also driving the growth in other sectors, so GDP is increasing. And we can debate whether GDP is a good metric to use, but GDP is also increasing in other sectors, so that's going to drive even more emissions. Thank you.
I think the two more questions are slightly interconnected, more on climate justice and equity. So Lynn is asking about, can you build more equity and justice options into the in economic growth lever? And CY is also asking about um the this proportionate effects on countries. So is there a
Yes.
way to see which countries will have like bigger global consequences?
Well, that's exactly why we've incorporated those maps. So, I was talking to a policymaker in a global north country that says, we're not going to be impacted by climate change much. And 50% of their food is imported. And then I showed them India and Indonesia and other places like heavily agricultural countries. It was like, this is what's going to happen to people in these places. And you may not care about people in these places, but that's going to impact on the supply chains, and that's going to drive inflation for your population. So that's why this model is global, because we want to show policymakers that you don't operate within a little silo of your country. You're part of this global system. There are people already impacted by climate change. Every time I show a map of wet bulb temperatures to people in the US, they're just shocked to see how many days of extreme heat. So that's a message we always want to convey, is that there are some people that are impacted by climate change right now, right? For you, maybe it's an issue next decade, but there are people that are suffering right now. And also, just selfishly, you must be interested because we're part of the global economy with global supply chains. Equity, so we don't have equity as a lever, unfortunately, but if you click and three dots and then the help button, there are actually some equity considerations under each of these sliders. So, the very obvious one, the impact on community. If you start phasing out coal in the community, and that's the major source of employment, you need to think about retraining people and providing new jobs and sources of income. So there's the 3 or 4 or 5 bullet points into each of these sliders, and a good facilitator. So when we engage with policymakers, for example, we make sure to emphasize those. Just like with carbon pricing, the reason why it's so challenging right now, it's a very effective climate solution, but it drives increases in energy prices for consumers. And so that's obviously a justice issue, environmental justice issue. And so policymakers need to take that into account in the design of the policy. So it's there, it's just not obvious on the control panel. We're really big on co-benefits. Can we solve for more than one societal problem, not just climate? And then we're also really big on pointing out that all of these solutions, they come with a cost as well. And so policymakers need to be aware of that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that also connects to this question. So, like, picking which countries will do which solutions, just so we see
Yeah,
that.
so the simulator is global, right? So when you simulate a policy, that means every government in the world will take that policy. Um, Another thing that's interesting, if you were to just simulate Indonesia or Malaysia doing one thing, you wouldn't even notice it, because if you think about every graph, it's such a huge combination of every country and every player within that country. So one country's it's really difficult to disaggregate one country passing a policy. That's why we have the global agreement, so that we're all doing the same thing, right? we're all electrifying, we're all reducing deforestation. So that's why you can simulate it on a global basis, but you can't do it on a country basis because you just wouldn't even notice. Saying that, China maybe is an example of where you would notice it because China's 30% of pollution. So them doing something significant obviously impacts everyone, but everyone else is relatively small.
Yeah,
But
and
there are other tools that are available for you to do that modeling on a country level or regional level, but En-ROADS is a global model. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
yeah. And finally, this is actually an important question for everyone. If journalists will use the tool, how should they attribute the results?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes. So I showed earlier the example of Maxime Jossolo, right, and how she used the model. Um, and thank you, by the way, for asking this question. It's great. Um, so on our website, you can see how we describe En-ROADS. But essentially, En-ROADS is a global climate model co-developed by Climate Interactive and MIT. It's on our website. I can't find the link now, but if in doubt, you can always email us. But yeah, it's a global climate simulator co-developed by Climate Interactive and MIT Sloan. So thank you.
So I think the clarification is just all about you just attribute the tool and explain what it is, and no, because it's a free tool, you won't have
Yeah.
to kind of like include anything else, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So, I'll share this example of New York Times. As you can see, they just said this is the En-ROADS co-developed, but they really didn't do more of an explanation to just what it is. It's a free model, so please use it. If you can credit us, that's great. But yeah, the most important thing is that you use it.
Yeah, and we'll definitely email you for those who opted to have more information about En-ROADS. We'll definitely email you like a packet and a kit for those who want to learn more. And uh, I don't know if I'm throwing Catherine under the bus, but they're actually helping other journalists. They're collaborating with journalists as well. If you want help in your story, so you can reach out to them. But we have just one more question before we go. Communities in Asia Pacific are already facing rising sea
Yeah.
levels and extreme weather. How can En-ROADS help amplify the voices of vulnerable communities in global national climate negotiations? You have an example. Very good question to close our session.
Yeah. Okay. This is an excellent question. So, our theory of change is an organization, Climate Interactive. We have this. We've developed this model. The model is the model. We know that we can't help every single individual in the world that is an advocate or engaging with negotiators or policymakers. We are building a global community of ambassadors. So these are the people who have taken our training, this training that I linked to. We're almost at 1,000 people now, and we have really strong ambassador groups in Philippines and Indonesia, by the way. One of our ambassadors used to work for Biena, for example. The other one is an academic at Telkom University. So our theory of change is we train people, we give them free training to use this model to then have local conversations about the need for more climate action. And a few of our ambassadors over the years have done workshops at COPs and at events leading up to COPs. So we don't think that it's our place to be dictating as to what needs to happen in the Philippines, right? It's really up to somebody in the Philippines that knows the local policymaking space, that understands the trade-offs, understands local nuances, to be able to engage policymakers. And what we do is we give you a good tool to do that and a mechanism. The mechanism is an interactive workshop, just like the one that we've just experienced. And actually, Biena, before we close, can I just run my last poll? I just forgot that I was going to ask you the same question we asked at the beginning about how
Sure.
confident folks feel, and I appreciate some people would have dropped off. So I'm going to ask this poll. I forgot. We went right into Q&A. I'm going to activate this. Hopefully, you still have the QR code. Now, after this workshop, for those of you still on the line, how confident are you in identifying how high impact climate actions and policies? So this is the poll we ran earlier. Thank you. Yes. So while you're doing that, I'm going to continue answering the question. So we do not presume to know anything about your country and the debates, and be well placed to really, as I said, dictate what needs to happen. So our theory of change is that we give people free training, advocates, university professors, policymakers, and we then equip them with the tools that they need to advocate for more ambitious policy. Great. So we have excellent. We've moved you to a little confident, very confident. Terrific. I love that. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. That really warms my heart. So thank you. That's great. All right, I'll stop sharing my screen. Hopefully that makes sense, Maria. So the idea here is to develop a network of local climate champions that can do exactly what I just did, but speaking the local language and knowing all the local the local environment. And so what we do is we equip people with tools, and we have so much support available as well. We have monthly webinars. We have you can write to us anytime with a technical question response. So that's how we reach people in all corners of the world. And 500,000 people have been through our workshops so far. So hopefully that answers the question. Let's close.
So, on behalf of Climate Tracker Asia, thank you so much, Katherine, the entire Climate Interactive team, for making this masterclass possible. We have another session this week for South Asia. Um, so for those of you who want to join again, you can do so. Thank you for all of you who showed up with your questions, experiences, and curiosity. Please stay connected with Climate Tracker Asia for upcoming fellowships, workshops, supporting opportunities, and learning sessions across the region. We will send you a kit for those who opted to. So I really hope you get to learn a lot of things this morning. Thank you again for spending your morning with us. Take care. Keep asking difficult questions. Keep telling climate stories that matter. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.